I'm Walter Bosley, author of Secret Missions 2, The Lost Expedition of Sir Richard Francis Burton. Available print on demand, only at lulu.com. Prologue. It was March of 1869 when a gaunt and haggard man of middle age sat in a cafe in Lima, Peru. He was drinking alone. His tattered coat looked as worn by the field as he did. The gaze in his tired eyes crossed 1,000 or more inward miles. He appeared completely oblivious to his surroundings. A nondescript establishment somewhere in the city where the Spanish conquest took root in Peru 3 centuries prior. This man had been in the city for several days and had apparently accomplished little more than a drinking binge beyond his own past exploits. He was spent, body and soul. Never had he been so thoroughly exhausted. It was as if Lima were the dullest spot in the world. He had never been to a place where he could not find something to entertain his ever-curious mind. What was wrong with him? It would be useless to describe the scene around the man at the small table, because he seemed to notice nothing except the bottle and whatever seemed to haunt him. He seemed to wake from a dream when an unidentified face paused to congratulate him. "Captain Burton, good luck on your post in Damascus." The man called Burton said nothing, history tells us. He simply stared. It seemed to come back to him, the world he had known before. In spite of what he had seen and experienced in the most dangerous jungle on the planet, in spite of his much-noticed transformation, Richard Francis Burton felt the world around him take shape again in a whirl of sound and color and light. After all that this strange and haunted land had shown him, he was simply going on to the next assignment. What you are about to embark upon is a speculation. In spite of all the recorded history about the life of Sir Richard Francis Burton, in spite of the volumes he produced during that lifetime of travel and exploration, science and sin, there remains a blank period about which not a word has ever been produced from his papers or books or any other source. To comprehend the astonishing curiosity of that seemingly small fact, consider how much Burton had written about every other place to which he traveled and the things he did and saw. Almost 50 books, over 20 pamphlets, and more than 200 other articles and reports. Burton even wrote a book, mostly about his time in Utah, which his critics considered beyond even his usual love of detail. Burton was indeed a prolific writer of his geographic, archaeological, and anthropological exploits. He was a scientist who sought to expand human knowledge. Scientists publish their findings, they share their data, and Burton certainly did that. But Richard Francis Burton was more than a mere scientific technician. He was an officer in the legendary East India Company. He was a linguist extraordinaire. He was a spy, one of the greatest in the history of the profession for his ability to disguise himself and penetrate otherwise forbidden territory. Where other men, most men to be honest, were not suited to the field, Burton excelled in frontiers and in the wilds. He drank hard, tasted the delights of every land he explored, and once took a spear through his face while fighting natives in Somaliland and lived to show off the scar. And most of all, he wrote about it. And that is the problem. Richard Francis Burton wrote profusely about everything he did, except 2 times, both in the Americas. The first instance was a conspicuous period of several weeks that he spent in the southern United States late in the year 1860, when war was looming. Burton, a British intelligence agent in Dixie just months before the U.S. Civil War, a war in which some wealthy aristocrats in England aided the Confederacy, suggests the obvious. The second and most curious blank space in his life is why this book was written. In the late 1860s, Richard Francis Burton was assigned as British consul to Brazil. He and his wife Isabel thrived there, in spite of the bouts of illness and the rigors of a tropical environment. Burton wrote books about the local wars, and he wrote books of cultural interest. His time there documented just as all his travels and scientific work in the years prior to and after Brazil had been, except the period late in his South American assignment. This most conspicuous hole in Burton's life is a period of 6 months he spent exploring the wilderness of South America, and practically nothing is written or even known about it. Nothing known of the numerous weeks he spent in the jungles and the high plains, two vast regions teeming with the sort of adventure that Burton lived for and always wrote about. This missing period in itself is a mysterious adventure begging to be explored. When he emerged in Lima, tattered and haggard, we are told Burton went on the drinking binge of his life. A man who had drank since youth and was known to hold his liquor like a champ, and who had seen up close all the ways the jungles and other wilds of the world could kill. This legendary man, not yet 48 years old, appears in Peru and spends weeks in cafes and bars, silent and visibly worn down, drinking every day. No one who knew him personally had heard from him for months. No one to this day knows exactly where he was or what he was doing during most of that time, save a vague episode in which he claimed to have spent Christmas fleeing from natives, 4 of whom he had to kill to save his own life. All we do know is what he later told and what few could corroborate. This misty period concludes with Burton, silent and stunned, drunk in a cafe in Peru. What happened? I will propose that what I suggest is the best possible answer to that particular question. Within the context of the place and the man's life, that Richard Francis Burton emerges in such a state after exploring the most fascinating place in the Western Hemisphere is curious indeed. I have an idea about what he was doing, and I have the evidence that there is something to my speculation. But before we go further, you need to know the context in which this mystery of Burton in South America becomes so enticing. It was all about the secrets of human history and why Sir Richard Francis Burton disappeared for 6 months into the land of mystery. By the time Burton came on the scene, the search for a lost civilization had been going on for centuries. The British involvement in that search dates back to before the Elizabethan period, during which that search started to become somewhat institutional. We will examine that in this book. The idea that there existed one or more advanced civilizations in the remote past has been of keen interest to highly intelligent men for a very long time. What exactly do we mean by an advanced civilization? Megalithic structures built upon a so-called world energy grid. Advanced languages lost to present-day understanding, a sophisticated grasp of astronomy and physics for its time, descriptions of flying machines and terrible weaponry, even medical technology and artificial light, things that should not have existed so long ago, according to consensus academia. Yet, the inconvenient evidence persists. These things fascinated some of the greatest minds Britain ever produced. Secret Missions 2, The Lost Expedition of Sir Richard Francis Burton by Walter Bosley is available print on demand only at lulu.com.